What's up guys, this is just a continuation of the previous video which we started off with an ArrayList. So before I start off, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to refactor this code which we have written for the ArrayList demo, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a method here of public void, and I'm going to call it as fill data, and inside this what I'm going to do is I'm going to all this method which is initializing the data. I'm going to do it here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a private modifier. This is a private to this class, and I'm going to name this as array list of names, right? Array list of uh, array list of string, and I'm going to name this as names. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this, right? So this is getting initialized here. So this is actually giving me an error because you know so we are going to refactor this one by one, as well as I'm going to copy this up, and I'm going to create one more method which I will call this as refill data, right? So here I'm going to have a refill data with, let's say that, you know names, and here I'm going to call this as names again. So this is actually giving me an error because this is a static block and non-static members are not allowed inside a static block. So that's the concept we have in Java. So what I'm going to do is, instead of that, I'm going to have a method here. So I'm going to call, let's say, public void, and I'm going to call this as list ops, right? So I'm going to call this as list operation. And inside this method I'm going to write all this code of this here. So this we have, so add all. So I remember that I created here this pin codes, right? So I'm going to again create one more array list, private array list, and I'm going to name this as, let's say, pin codes. And I'm going to have pin codes here, and I'm going to add pin codes. This is just a refactoring of code. So now our code looks very good. And as this is inside the ArrayList demo class, I have two instance variable which is private to this class. So these variables will be only accessed inside this class. I have a main method, and then I have few, you know, the methods here, right? So I have created an object of ArrayList demo. So let's use that object here. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to call, let's say, field data. So what this method will do is it will actually initialize the names array list, and then it will add all this method. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the operation, list operation. So inside this it will actually print everything here, and you'll get the same output as what we were getting previously. So I'm going to run this code. The purpose of this video is I want to make this code shorter, and this is how you actually refactor it. So if you see here, this is actually giving me a null pointer exception. Why? So here I'm going to have a names dot add all. This is pin code because I forgot to call the refill data here. So you need to actually also call the refill data. This is actually giving me a null pointer exception because the instance variable I have initialized, this is by default null, and it is actually getting initialized inside this refill data. That's why when it is doing an operation of add all, it is giving me a null pointer exception. So just beware of this, right? So whatever you are doing, you are adding right here, it should not be null, or it will throw you a null pointer exception. So let's run this code again. If I run this code, you'll notice the output as same as what we got in the previously. So this is what we have. right? So the size of the array list is 4. At the third index, we have the value of Johnson, and the this is going to print whether the add all operations succeed or not. And then we have again an updated size value. So this is same as what we did, and this is for each, right? So what we can do here is we can also use a for loop. So I'm going to use a for loop. I'm going to have in I is equals to 0, I is less than names dot size, right? So here I made some mistake, names dot size, and I'm going to increment this I plus plus. And what you can do is, okay, so here it should be I is less than names dot size. And what you can do is system dot out dot println. I can say that for loop, and you can get the value. So for loop is equals to plus, right? You can get the value of at ith index. So to get the value of ith index, you cannot do something like this. That is not possible in Java. So to get an element at specific index, you need to use a get method. And inside this get method, I can pass the value of I. So when you run this code, you'll get the output as, you know, so this is running a for loop at the 0th index is spawn, as so it will run through the loop. We are using the traditional for loop, right? So in the similar lines, you can also use a for each. So inside this for each, as this is a string, right? This is an array list or string. So we need to have string data here, and then we need to have here the collection. Remember that we can have collection as well as arrays. So right now I'm going to use a collection. And what we can do is we can, s out. So rather I will use this, and I can have an enhance for loop, and then I can get the value here. So I can get whatever the data I'm getting here. So let's refactor this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this code so that my terminal doesn't get overloaded, right? So as well as I'm going to again comment this up, and let's see what is the output of this. So I'm going to run this code, and you'll see that it's going to give us, the enhanced for loop, the professor, spawn, Chirag, Johnson, and it's giving me 4 errors because only for data, because I haven't refilled it, right? I have commented the code for refilling here. So what you can do is you can call the refill method, right? So here I did a fill, actually I'm refilling it, right? So, but it's still giving me for, so let's see what is the error here I should have got. So here I'm going to have a pin code, and okay, I didn't do the add all method here, right? So I have commented that. So I'm doing a refill method, but I need to do an add all operation, and I need to add pin codes, and then I'm all good to have all the data, right? So if I run this code, then you are getting all both the data of both the collection in one go, right? So these are all operations you can do, as well as I have talked about the iterator interface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to again create a method here, which I will call it as public void iterate list, right? And inside this, I'm going to use an iterator interface to iterate through each of these elements. So what I'm going to do is iterator, right? Okay, so iterator itr. So I'm going to have, let's say, iterator is equals to list. So I'm going to have names dot iterator. So this is going to give me an iterator instance, right? So this is if you go inside this, this is actually an instant. This is actually an interface. And if you see that the array list actually implements, if you see this class, right, the ArrayList class, it actually extends an abstract list, but it implements the list, right? And the list interface actually extends the collection interface, and the collection interface actually extends the iterable interface. And if you go inside this iterable interface, you have this iterator here. So this actually help us to iterate through each of these elements, this method, right? So what I'm going to do is we are going to iterate through this using an iterator. So to do that, we need to first check whether we have an element. So iterator dot has next. So I'm going to use an sout, and I'll say that iterator dot iterator dot next, right? So this is going to print whatever element we have. So let's do this. Let's call this method from the main method here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of list operation, I'm going to call, the iterator or a iterate list method. So if I call this method, you'll see the output as, the professor. Okay, so I'm using while, so it should be while. So this is where, control statements comes into the picture. So as I use only if statement, right? So it only executed once, but I need to use here while, because while the iterator has the next element, as long as the interface, the array list has a next element, just loop through it, right? So I'm going to run this code here again. So to run this code, I'm going to run a main method, and then you will see the output as Professor Spawn, Chirag, and Johnson, because I'm not doing add all here inside this iterator. So if you do the add all, you can have all the data, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this code and in a GitHub. I'm going to share that up. So I'm going to uncomment this, and I'm going to call here array list of demo dot list operation. So this is all about the array list, and I'm going to use this for loop as well. Right. So what you can do is, if you follow this video, you can format this output, right? You can format this output inside the string.out.print line to have a better view in a console, right? So in the next tutorial, we are going to see about the next list interface, which is called as a vector. So till then, goodbye and see you in next tutorial.